foods, so we'll see you then. Oh, by the way, McNeil, I hope you didn't forget that you and Avery are running today's PT. I know it will go well, but if it doesn't, it's your neck on the line.
Crap. Well, you did it again, McNeil. You forgot all about this. Now you have to put something together in the last minute. I know. Quickly, to my mind palace. That way I can slow down time and I can figure this thing out. Ah, my mind palace, where I talk to my advisors and come up with meaningful PD. Ron Swanson and Bigfoot. The two of you are my advisors when it comes to human interactions. How should I approach this PD? Run away and hide in the forest? Well, that's great, Bigfoot, but I can't do that if I'm giving the PD. It's my understanding that people, in general, are easy to impress by shiny things, so maybe start with that. You're right, Mr. Swanson. If I start with something bright and shiny, but it doesn't mean anything, I might convince people that I know what I'm talking about. How about I start with who I am and some of the work I've done in the past? What do you think, Mr. Swanson? It would be fine. Now, if you don't mind, I have something else to do. And by something else, I mean not talking to you. My name is Derek McNeil, and I'm a science teacher here at George Washington. And I'm here to talk to you about some of the projects I've been working on this year. But first, a little about me. I've won some grants. I've won a few competitions in education. I've given a few talks, and I've worked for the district on stuff. A sec, McNeil. Don't go overboard. You're going to put some people to sleep. Thanks, Aaron Sands. You're right. I don't want to sound full of myself. Let's move on to what's next. By the way, Aaron, you're amazing.
Don't you have some questions you needed to answer?
You're right, random gray alien. Let's start with that. Question 1. What was it about Soul that piqued your interest? Here, let me answer this. Kids are amazing. They're capable of high levels of learning if we just can get out of their way. Let's go a little deeper into that. Information is cheap if not free. We no longer live in a world where we need stacks of books to learn. This is great because the amount of wealth isn't limiting students when it comes to learning. The downside is that information is now decentralized, but learning is still centralized.
What that really means is that students are learning all the time in ways that aren't supported in schools. In addition, there are a lot of things that we do as educators that are in conflict with their type of learning. Think of a child sitting in a shopping cart in the grocery store. The kid is on a cell phone playing with an app. That child is learning in an unstructured way. As that kid grows older, their parents download more and more apps. Thus, the kid will continue to use this method to learn. Then the kid is old enough for school and starts to learn how to learn in a very structured way. Some kids adapt, but others won't, and regardless of their skill set, struggle with school.
In addition, because we don't live in a world where information is important, that means the question, who is buried in Grant's tomb, is meaningless. The appropriate question is, how could we find who is buried in Grant's tomb? As learning how to find information is far more important than the information itself. Remember, McNeil, talking doesn't equal working. Keep it short. Describe the term sandbox-based learning. Sandbox is a gaming term for types of games that have little or no structure, where players are allowed to explore the world freely. Games like Minecraft, Starbound, Terraria, Skyrim, and Fallout 4 are all sandbox games. These type of games typically have three types of players. The console player, who just simply plays the game. The programmer, who actually is developing the game. And then there's a modder community that's associated with these games that allow it to make changes. We felt the current game-based learning model lacked the kind of freedom that Soul offered. So I started developing the Sandbox method. There's a lot to talk about, and I'd love to spend more time talking about this topic, but in order to keep it simple, I want to move on to the next question.
Question 3. Describe the task that my students are working on right now. Well, There are currently 3 groups of students, each doing different things. Group 1. The Sandbox learners are writing their own video game using a program called RPG Maker. I have a document with all of their learning objectives. My learning objectives come from IB Physics because unlike the CDE objectives, they are very well written. I personally picked out the ones that align with CDE or NGSS standards. Students pick the standards and substandards, then the students pick out all of the key terms in that standard. Then they define each term and finally write 5 to 10 questions that hopefully anyone playing the game will be able to answer. They then build the game. After they finish building the game, they write up a traveling journal with just the key term, with no definitions, as well as any graphic images that might help understand the topic and the questions. The game and the traveling journal is handed off to another player, and we find out how good of a job they did building the game. Group 2 is a traditional soul program. I ask a question and let the students look for an answer online. They share their ideas with other students, and in the last 10 minutes, we talk about what they found out. For example, I asked, in the skyline, the space elevator had one problem that can only be solved by carbon nanotubes. So what's the problem, and how will carbon nanotubes resolve that problem? Students then go off looking for a solution. Some look up what is a carbon nanotube, others find a TED Talk on space elevators, and others look up the difference between high carbon steel and carbon nanotubes. We then just talk about what we found and how we can answer the question. The last group just went to the easiest path, so they're using all of the assignments and the video lectures I put together at the beginning of the year. Question 4. How did I initially organize and structure the students' work? As I watched their work unfold, what assignments I needed to make along the way. So I came into Sandbox Learning by recruiting a few students to it. I told them what I wanted to do, what I imagined it would look like, and more importantly, why I wanted to do it. It seemed like it could work, so I rolled it out to more students, and I had a large number of people doing Sandbox Learning. Then the wheels kind of fell off the cart. I needed some structure, some framework to work from, so I stopped class one day and asked kids what things we might need. Added forums, brought in the IB standards, and that's where I'm at right now. As for next year, I have some huge adjustments to make over the summer. So with the Soul group, I wanted to see how other Soul programs work, so I asked students if they wanted something else to do. We then watched the movie Skyline, and I wrote down questions that could be the question for class. This group is relatively new, so I haven't really had much of a chance to make changes for the work for this group. This will likely take place over the summer. I like what the art team presented as a sign-in form online and having the question ready each day for the year. The last group I have been working on for the last 5 years, so I have a lot in place for that already. Question 5. What would my students say about this approach to learning? Well, it's a mixed bag. Some hate it, some love it. But I want to make some changes for next year to help with these issues. Plus, next year I see the first 6 weeks as having all of my class try each of the 3 methods, 2 weeks for each, and then I have them decide which way to go from there. Question 6. Is it deep learning? Is it rigorous? Yes and yes. Wow, that was easy. Question 7. How do I balance the soul approach to learning with other types of teaching and learning? Well, I haven't done it right now,